So tonight we're going to go to the next little phase of what we've been looking at. And so, if you recall, I said we're breaking it down into three sets of three lessons each. And so the first was getting into Egypt. Second was God preparing Moses to be the deliverer. Third is God's judgment on Egypt. And so now, for the next tonight and 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at how God gets Israel out of Egypt and how he brings them to Mount Sinai. And one thing that I want you to consider, and that is that when you have deliverance, you also have to have judgment. Judgment and deliverance really kind of go hand in hand together. When you look at Israel leaving Egypt, you see it. Israel would have never left Egypt had not God judged Egypt. And so it took God's judgment on Egypt to get them to be able to leave Egypt. And at the same time, when you think about our salvation, when I'm talking about our salvation, I'm talking about like our ultimate salvation, where we are in our glorified bodies with the Lord forever and ever. We're not going to get there until God delivers us with the judgment of sin on this earth. There's got to be the judgment of sin first before he can go and renew all things. And so before there's a new heaven and new earth, before there's a millennial kingdom, before there's a coming again, there's got to be a judgment of sin first, and then that, okay? So as we look at these, tonight's lesson, I just want you to kind of keep that in your back of your mind. And as we talk about Israel leaving out of Egypt, kind of think about that as far as this idea about judgment and deliverance, okay? Okay, so we are taking a look, first of all, in chapter 12 and verse number 31. This is where we were last week when we had just finished the 10th plague. Okay, so in chapter 12, you remember we've got the Exodus, the Passover. And then we've got the Lord striking down the firstborn in Egypt. And what we see, starting in verse number 31, is the Israelites being left, being allowed to leave. So in verse number 31, it says, "During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, 'Up, lead my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herd as you have said, and go and also bless me.' The Egyptian urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die." And I guess that would be a pretty accurate statement, right? They're thinking, well, this is it. We can't take any more. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. And, as far as the Lord making the people favorably disposed, or the Egyptians making the Israelites favorably disposed to the Egyptians, I kind of wonder, kind of how that is. And just, I think that they had so much fear of the Lord and fear of what the Lord would do that, when the Israelites come up and say, hey, we're leaving, can I have any gold, any silver, any clothing, anything like that? They're like, okay, you're Israelites, you're Lord, I'm giving this to you in respect for the Lord. Was it wrong for them to do that? I mean, did that mean that they were stealing from them? Well, I mean, you can think about it that, the Israelites had been in slave labor for a long time. And so, right then and there, it wouldn't have been any problem for them to say, hey, can we have some payment for what we've gone through? Okay. All right. So anyway, what we see in verse number 37 says the Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkoth. They were about 600,000 men on foot, okay? So this is 600,000 men that would have been counted in the time of the census. This is not including the women or the children. And it's not including some of the other people that came along with them. We see in verse number, 38, many other people went with them, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. And so there were other people that were not Israelites that came along for the ride, so to speak. There were some people that probably looked at the plagues and realized, hey, this is the true and living God, and wanted to follow and worship. There's probably some other people that just felt like, hey, let's get out here because something's got to be better than what we're at right now. There would have been people who have been, disenfranchised or whatever. And those were the people, as you go and take a look at Exodus and Numbers, these are the people that caused a lot of the trouble for the Israelites along the way. Okay? All right, if we skip on down to verse number 40, here is an interesting thing. It says, now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. Now, do you remember what God told Abraham about how long his descendants were going to be in Egypt? 430 years. But look at this last little bit here. It says, at the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. So, you just think about that. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? God says it's going to be 430 years, and this is not an approximation. This is 430 years to the very day. And so here is that night, Pharaoh striking the firstborn, God striking the firstborn in all Egypt, Pharaoh summoning Aaron and Moses and saying, get out, and that next day they are leaving. And so you talk about with Passover, Moses says, tuck your sandal cloak in your belt, have your sandals on your feet, have your staff in your hand, eat it in haste. Well, it's because they are leaving very quickly and in haste. Okay? All right. So as far as, I thought maybe we need another map. Our old map was kind of, getting a little bit out of date for what we're talking about here. But now we got a new map, and you notice that the new map says the traditional route of the Exodus. And so there's going to be other non-traditional routes of the Exodus, because you remember that we said, okay, here is the traditional location of Mount Sinai, but there's other people that have Mount Sinai kind of over here, some have it over here, some have it over here. And so if you have it, let's say, for example, over here, then you've got a different route for the Exodus, do you not? Okay. And so we're not going to think about, the different alternative routes. We're just going to focus on the traditional route, okay? Now, how they really went is anybody's guess. To be honest with you, I mean, we can make educated guesses, and we should make educated guesses, but at the same time, there are different locations that the Lord is going to give us, like, for example, Ramses and Sukkoth, and then there is going to be I forgot, Pi Ha-Keroth, and across from Beth Palazer, I think is the name. Anyway, there's locations that are there, but the question is, where are those locations? I mean, when God inspired Moses to write this way back when, people knew that, and people back then knew that. Now it's kind of a little bit of a archaeological find or things like that. Okay? All right. Now, when you look at this, you notice that the traditional route or at least this traditional route, is going here, Ramses, Sukkoth. Well, that's not showing up very well, is it? Ramses, come on now. Okay. We've got Ramses, and then we've got Sukkoth. And you notice that the path kind of goes like this, and down here like that, right? Okay? Now, we look at a bigger picture of this, and we say, oh, well, wait a minute, they crossed the Red Sea, and we've got the Red Sea way down here at the map. A lot of times you'll see Red Sea labeled right here in the Gulf of Suez. These are the modern designations of Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea. You go on off the map, you got the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman and everything like that, right? Okay. So you may be saying, well, wait a minute. The Bible says that they crossed the Red Sea. Well, there's a couple of things that we got to take in consideration here. And one thing that we have to take in consideration is that in the original Hebrew, the Red Sea is Yam Suf. And when you translate Yam Suf, it isn't Red Sea, it is actually Reed Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. Okay? The reason, and that's actually why, because the Red Sea really isn't red, the reason why the Red Sea is actually called the Red Sea is because of a typo. It really was the Reed Sea, and somehow that second E got lost. And so that in the course of time, that's how the Red Sea became the Red Sea. And so really we're talking about the Sea of Reeds. And so where exactly is this Sea of Reeds? Because you're looking at this and you're thinking, hey, wait a minute. This doesn't really look like much of a sea up here. Well, one thing that we also have to take in consideration is the topography of today's time can be very different than the topography back then. There's evidence that there were a lot of different lakes and bodies of water between the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Suez. Okay? And so I think that maybe the authors in the map kind of maybe expanded this. I don't know. Maybe those are actually in place right now. But keep in mind that just because, it's not here, the Gulf of Suez, like that doesn't negate the fact that God miraculously divided the Red Sea and the Israelites miraculously went across. You got to understand that, this is a very large body of water right here. And, these little lakes right here, even though we say they're little lakes, they could be huge lakes once you get up to it. And when you think about the Exodus itself, you've got to understand that there is a certain time frame for all the Israelites to get through the Red Sea on foot, women, children, carts. I know that they're hurrying, but how fast can approximately 2 million people go and 2 million people move? Because you've got, the 600,000 men, but when you add everybody else, people estimate about 2 million.
When you kids about a day.
It takes your kids about a day. That's right.
Did you say topography?
Huh?
Did you say topography?
Just simply the lay of the land here.
I just asked if you said topography.
I think I did say topography. Did I use the wrong word?
I thought you said topology, and then I thought, no, he said topography, and I can't remember.
Okay, well, whatever I said. It's just the lay of the land.
Topography.
Topography. Did I say topography?
Topology is the study of connectedness.
Oh, okay, well, I'm sure that they were connected at some point. But no, that's not what I'm talking about. Topography. Okay.
Well, they also had a lot of animals with them, right?
They did. Yeah. So, we're talking, if you take 2 million, I know that way back, like 20 years ago, there were 2.75 million people in the greater St. Louis area.
Let's not forget about all the gold they had to carry.
And the gold, everything. I mean, we're talking about it. It is not an easy task. Now, when we look at when they crossed the Red Sea, they really just had several hours to do it. So how is a group of people that large going to cross, let's say, 50 miles in a couple of hours? Okay, it's not really going to work out. I read a statistic that if you took 2 million people and you lined them up in rows of 10, 10 people 5 feet apart, 10 people 5 feet apart, 10 people 5 feet apart, Do you know how long that column of people is going to be? Almost 200. Okay? And so when we talk about, the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, I think that we oftentimes have a mental image that, you got the water, a wall of water on the right, the wall of water on the left, and, a little column of people going through the center, and great big, and a little whale swimming in there, That's I don't think that that's the way it was, because how can you get 2 million people to go through an area like that? I think that we're probably talking about, crossing that maybe a mile wide, okay? And so if you take a body of water and separate a mile of it, even if that body of water is 20 feet deep, just imagine how big that wall is on the right and how big that wall is on the left. And just imagine the force of that water coming back down. Okay? All right. Now, wherever they cross through the Red Sea, it's got to be something that's deep. There's going to be some liberal scholars that say, oh, well, since it's a sea of reeds, it was just simply a marshy area that dried up. No, it wasn't. It was a body of water that was deep enough that would drown Pharaoh's armies in it. Okay? And the water separated on the right, on the left, dry ground in the middle. It was undoubtedly a miracle of God. Okay?
It also didn't have to have walls, though. Walls of water.
Well, it says in there, and we'll get to that part, there was water on the wall, right and left.
Yeah,
okay?
But it doesn't say that it was in a towering wall.
We'll get to it, because I don't want to jump over there and look for it at the time. Okay. All right.
I
Okay.
like the pictures of towering walls of water.
What's that?
I like the pictures of towering walls of water.
Okay. Do you like the picture of the whale swimming in there?
It's fine.
Okay. It's kind of that actually would be kind of neat if you're walking and here's this water and you can see the fish and everything in that.
I've been to an aquarium before, and whales are cool, but the power of God be a little bit more true.
Well, right, but that would accentuate the power of God to me, is to be able to look and see.
Whales are normal.
So, well, I don't know that the whales would be there, but
Whales are everywhere.
okay. Moving on. Don't mean to cut off good conversation, but we got chapters to get through tonight. It's like the Israelites got a long, get through the Red Sea. We got to get through these chapters. Okay, so what we see is that when we move into chapter 13, going into verse number 17, is that God was with him and God was leading them. When we take a look at verse number 17, it says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. So when we look at this on the map, here is the most logical choice, isn't it? And that is that when we look at this, here's Ramses, and there is the road of the way to the Philistines that is going to be going up here to this area. Okay, so this road would be the way to go. But God did not want them to go that way. The reason why he didn't want them to go that way is, as we continue on down, for God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. And so one thing that we have to realize is that, these people have been enslaved in Egypt. They're not going to be a fighting force. They're not going to be people that, have a dependence. They're people who have been idolaters. They're not going to really have a knowledge and understanding of God's power and a belief in it. So this whole way that God leads them is to mature them and grow them and form them into a nation. And not just form them into a nation, but to form them into his nation with his laws and his ways and customs, and not the ways of the Egyptians. Okay? All right. So what we see is that the Israelites went out, and as we see, and we skip on down to verse number 21, it says, by day the Lord went ahead of them, in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. And so as this big mob of people is moving, here is this huge pillar that everybody can see out in front of them. The day it's going to be a cloud. At night it's going to be fire. What this is God's presence. And it's there so that everybody can know this is God. God is leading us. God is directing us. We just follow the cloud. We follow the fire, and we're following God. Boy, if it could just only be that easy, right? Okay. Now, I want you to see something unusual in chapter 14, verse number 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp near Pi Hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal Ziphron. I didn't use that word earlier, but that's the name that I was trying to think of. Baal Ziphron. Okay, so here are the Israelites. They're going, right? They're going. Wait a minute. Now we got to go back. I don't know, exactly how that route changes, but now they've got to go back. They're still following the Lord, but they're going back. They're going around a different way. And now all of a sudden they're coming, and what's in front of them? The sea. Can you go through the sea? No, you can't. Okay? So basically, you're just kind of stuck there, right? But God is leading you. Okay? Now keep that in mind. So what we see is that in verse number 5 is that God has a plan for this. And that, well, if we skip on up, verse number 3, it says, Pharaoh will think, and this is the Lord speaking, Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around in the land of confusion, hemmed in by the desert, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart so he will pursue them, but I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. And so here's the plagues, and the purpose of the plagues, to judge Egypt. It seems like now we got something else, right? Because Pharaoh still is not going to learn his lesson. And so it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you got it, but let's just add a little bit more onto it just to make sure that you understand. And so what we see is in verse number 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over them all. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth opposite Baal Ziphron. And so here's the people, right? And I said, remember the people, okay? We're going this direction. Wait a minute, now we're not going this direction. Now we're turning back. Now we're going over here. We're following the Lord. And there is a sea that is in front of us. We can't cross the sea. And we're not going around the sea. We're following the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud. And where has that led us? Here. Stopped. Okay? Pharaoh is seeing through reports, oh, people are wandering around. What have we done? Let's go get them. And so he pursues them. And so the Israelites that are there at the sea stopped. Guess what? They turn around, and this is what they see. In verse number 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to the desert to die? What have you done by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? It would be better to serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Here's the complaining starting, right? And I mean, people are scared. And when people are scared, they oftentimes Don't think logically or don't think reasonably. Don't think, hey, wait a minute, God who's just destroyed the Egyptians, he can take care of this. No problem. There's no problem too big for God, and we know it because we have just seen it by experience. Okay? They're not thinking that way. They're thinking emotionally, and they're thinking the Egyptians are going to come in here, they're going to slaughter us, they're going to kill us. Moses, what have you done to us? You wish you would have just left us alone in Egypt. And so Moses answered the people and said, don't be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. That is such a good lesson for us, right? When there's things in our lives that we're scared and terrified out and we're calling out to the Lord, we just need to remember, hey, wait a minute, God can take care of this. God can handle these problems. We just simply need to be still. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to be stationary. It does mean that we need to be calm, and we need to let God work. Okay? So this is what happens. God does work. Now, what we see, starting in verse 17, is this. So the Lord told Moses what he needed to do. And what we see is that Moses, skipping back to verse 15 or 16, raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all of his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through the Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel throughout the night. So now we've got an indication that it's dark, right? Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other, so that neither went near the other all night long. So you got the cloud that's over toward the Egyptian side, and because it's night, the Egyptians can't see anything. If they can't see anything, are they going to go anywhere? No, they're going to be frozen in their tracks because they don't, it's dark, it's like, foggy, there's no way that they can move. At the same time, and the Egyptians don't know this, the other side of the pillar is going to be fire and light, so it is going to be lighting the way of what's going on. And so what we see is that Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and it turned into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. Okay? And so it is no water, straight up water. Right? Like I said, if you take an area of water, and again, it doesn't have to be that deep. Let's just say it's 20 feet deep, 50 feet deep. That's pretty shallow when you talk about a body of water. But if you move that a mile and then you put it on either side, it is going to be a wall. Now, I'm not saying that it is like, a wall and then coming back down, but it is a wall as far as a straight area here. Let me just draw it here. Instead of, you got a wall and you've got a wall. And so it doesn't have to be something like this with water and this with water. It could be something that is, up here and then flowing backward like that, right? But on either side, there is enough of a slope there to make it a wall, to where in between is going to be the dry ground for the people to go through. And again, if we're talking about just a few people across, then we're talking about an enormous column. Instead, it makes more sense to have a whole bunch of people all the way across, a mile, let's say. I'm just making that up. Then you could get people through in the length of time that's necessary, because all this is going to be taking place that night. So what we see in verse number 25 is the Lord goes the Egyptians pursue them, and the Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of the chariots come off, so they had difficulty driving. And so here's the Egyptian. They're down there in the seabed. And then all of a sudden the Lord's just like, okay, I'm just going to have the wheels fall off the chariots. And by the way, the Egyptians with their chariots, I mean, this was the superpower of the ancient world. This is aircraft carriers and F-35s and, everything like that. I mean, this is equipment that the rest of the world did not even have, could not have. And the Egyptians were so superior to everybody else because of their military might, their military equipment. So no wonder the Israelites were scared, right? Okay, well, here's the Lord. He causes the chariot wheels to fall off, and they're stuck down there in the seabed. And look at the last little thing about what the Egyptians say. It says in the last part of verse number 25, the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." No, duh. I mean, come on. What has the Lord been doing all of this time? Judgment against Egypt, deliverance for Israel. Judgment against Egypt, deliverance for Israel. Is it any wonder that they have been baited into this trap to go down in there, and here they are thinking, oh yeah, hey, there's a wall of water over there, and there's a wall of water over there, and it's dry ground right in front of us. So since the Israelites were able to go through, it's going to be fine for us. Let's go. What could possibly go wrong? Right? How hard can it be? All right. Well, okay. And so what we see is that in verse number 26, then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak, when the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. So, like I said, you imagine this huge amount of water, and just think about what water is. I mean, water flows. It has power. It has force. It has weight. It's incredibly fast. I mean, growing up in New Mexico with the arroyos that were through there, every single summer there was somebody that was playing in the arroyos when a thunderstorm came in and swept them off down the river, and the fire department was out there and, grabbing them, had lines across, and they'd say that, water that's 4 inches deep, moving like 30, 35 miles an hour, there's no way that you can even stand, because of the force. So, just think about a wall of water, and if you've got something that is coming from a mile, half a mile, or, however the distance, just imagine the force that's coming. And so even if Pharaoh's army is trying to go against it, they're just being swept and pulled right back into the midst of it. Okay? All right. And so what we see in verse number 29 is, but the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Again, what we're going to see is the Lord is doing things to get people to trust him and trust Moses too. Okay, you got comments and questions on any of this?
I never
Yes.
thought of it before, but, you know, I was trying to figure out, like, what was Egypt like after this? I mean, all their servants are gone. Now all their, you know, army's gone. Most of the men probably have been killed. I mean, do they just,
Well,
Their elite armies,
Israel had 2 million people. Egypt had millions more.
oh, okay.
And the 600 chariots was a big military force, but the main value in that military force is in the chariots.
Okay.
The chariots were expensive, took a long time to make. 600 was a lot.
Gotcha.
But they could get 600 more men. You know, that's a millions and millions and millions. It's the biggest nation in the entire earth. So.
Gotcha.
I think Egypt probably wish they had life jackets.
Life jackets would even help.
I don't think it would help either.
No.
Yeah.
Not with that amount.
Not with that force.
Not when you
So,
got
Carol, you know, we've talked about like archaeology, and we talked earlier about, you know, the dating of the Exodus with archaeology and everything like that. One reason why people want to use the 1230 date is because of the archaeological finds of what was going on in Canaan and the destruction that was there during, you know, about that time period of the Israelites coming in. But also the fact that the Egyptians, the Egyptians controlled, when we look at the map again, the Egyptians controlled all of this area. I mean, that was their sphere of influence. I mean, you know, they weren't conquering the other nations, but they had superior power to all those other nations at that time. But for windows of periods in history, all of a sudden Egypt's weak. And so that's what makes people say, oh, well, the Exodus probably happened at this time, or the Exodus probably happened at that time, because of the, you know, the weakness that the Egypt portrayed.
So Gulf of Suez Canal, that all belongs to Egypt. It still does, don't it?
Well, today, let's see, I think that the Suez Canal, I don't know why that keeps doing that, but the Suez Canal actually connects the Gulf of Suez with the Mediterranean Sea. And I don't know exactly where Egypt, well, actually I do. I think it's up here. And so Egypt has all of this territory. I don't know how far it
But
goes
modern
over.
Egypt is
So
Modern
not
Egypt,
even
yes.
Suez
connected
Canal belongs to Egypt then.
Yes, it does.
It's never belonged to Israel.
During
weakness-
Solomon's time, they did exercise control of
the
that.
Suez Canal.
Oh, no, not the Suez Canal.
Yeah,
That's modern.
And the weakness of Egypt at the time of the Exodus is mainly attributed to the famines and the other curses from God.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just the Israelites leaving, which would have an impact, but that time was supposed to be a really hard time with losing their whole crop, their livestock, and everything like
That's
that.
true. I forgot
I
about
think
that.
all of the plagues, the destruction in the Red Sea, the Israelites leaving, I think all of that, you know, really impacted Egypt for centuries to come. But when you look at Egyptian history, you don't see any of it. And so people say, oh, the Exodus was a myth, because otherwise Egypt would have recorded it. But why would they record something like that?
Right. It made
You
them
know,
look even
people
weaker.
were not concerned about historical facts and accuracy and details. They were concerned about power and might and strength, and that was a reminder of what they did.
My dad was in World War II, so he went up Gulf of Suez Canal. Now, did he have to get off the boat and get on the army truck to get to the Mediterranean Sea, or does that canal go all the way up there?
Now the canal does, but I don't know when the canal was made.
In World War II, the canal went all the way to the Mediterranean.
Oh, did it? Okay.
It was made.
Oh, it does go up to.
Oh, yeah. The canal connects the Mediterranean Sea with.
It didn't used
The
to
Gulf of
though.
Suez.
It didn't used to though.
Well, I mean, canal's man-made, and so I don't know when the canal was
It
made.
was, I can't remember the year, but it's the early 1900s, and it was complete well before World War II.
Oh,
Okay. Or at least complete enough to be connected. I'm sure they've probably expanded it. I don't know.
okay. But that's part of Egypt anyway, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Panama Canal was complete then too. The Panama
it
Canal
was in
built.
the early
Roosevelt built
1900s.
the Panama Canal back in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. So,
Why is Lower Egypt so high up?
because
I'm just joking.
That's what I wondered.
okay, yeah, and, Lower Egypt is lower in elevation, and there's Middle Egypt and Upper
It's
Egypt.
the
But-
river. It's
Yeah,
it's
it's-
the
Gotcha.
downstream of the river.
Okay.
Yeah, the Nile
I kept
River
thinking
is
that
flowing
earlier
that
too. I'm like,
direction.
Oh yeah, yeah. Upper Egypt is upstream of the Nile. Lower Egypt is downstream.
gotcha.
Should have made that point clear. Okay, let's pray. Dear Lord in heaven, we thank you for everything you've given us, and we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for the word and the direction that it gives us, and we thank you for your strength and your power. Lord, help us to trust you and believe that you'll take care of things, and please be with us as we go our ways. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.